Trent Dawson ruled Summit Ridge High until he messed with the wrong girl. What happened next stunned everyone. It began with a look. Not the kind you brush off, but the kind that lingers. The kind that makes your skin crawl and tells you, you don't belong here. 16-year-old Jasmine Whitfield had been in Summit Ridge, Idaho, for just 3 weeks, and already she felt like an outsider. She wasn't surprised. Her father's job meant constant moves. Some towns welcomed newcomers. Others, like Summit Ridge, made sure you knew you were unwelcome. Jasmine moved through the halls with quiet steps, her backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes low, hoping to stay invisible. Her dad had warned her about boys like Trent Dawson, the ones who acted like they owned everything and everyone. At first, Jasmine hoped she'd fly under the radar. That hope didn't last. By day 3, Trent had singled her out. It started small. Whispers in the hallway, laughter behind her back, just loud enough. Then came the comments, her hair, her voice, the way she walked. Every part of her was suddenly up for ridicule. She tried to ignore it. But some things can't be ignored forever. Experience had taught Jasmine that silence was safest. But Trent Dawson hated being ignored. It happened on a quiet afternoon in English class. Mr. Holloway was mid-sentence, explaining The Great Gatsby, when a sharp whisper cut through the room. "Hey, new girl!" Jasmine didn't look up. Her pen kept moving. "I'm talking to you, Whitfield." She gripped her pen tighter, keeping her eyes on the page. Trent smirked, slouching back in his seat. Funny how some people show up where they clearly don't belong. A few snickers floated through the classroom. Jasmine stayed focused, forcing her breathing to stay even. "But hey," Trent continued, voice dripping with mockery. "Maybe you're just lost. A school like this, with people like us, must feel a little out of your league, huh?" Jasmine's chest tightened. Still, she said nothing. She had promised herself she wouldn't give people like him the satisfaction. But Trent wasn't finished. He leaned in, just enough to make her flinch. "What's the matter, Whitfield? Deaf? Or is it hard to hear over all that? Whatever you've got going on." Before Jasmine could react, Mr. Holloway's voice sliced through the tension. "Trent?" The class froze. Mr. Holloway's eyes were fixed on him, cold and stern. "Do you have something you'd like to share with the class?" Trent raised his hands in mock surrender, a smug smile on his face. "No, sir. Just giving the new student a warm welcome." Mr. Holloway shot Trent a warning glare before turning back to the board. Trent smirked at Jasmine one last time, then slouched in his seat like nothing had happened. She exhaled quietly. Maybe it's over. Maybe he'll get bored. Then something landed on her desk. A folded note. Her fingers hovered over it for a second. She knew better, but still, she opened it. "Go back to where you came from." Her chest tightened. A familiar ache bloomed in her stomach. But she didn't flinch. Didn't let her face change. She folded the note neatly, tucked it into her bag, and stared straight ahead like nothing had happened. He doesn't get the win. But this wasn't the end. Not even close. Trent Dawson had no idea who her father was, or what Jasmine had learned from him. And soon he'd find out. But before that, things were about to get worse. Much worse. Jasmine had met boys like Trent before. Every town had one. Loud, entitled, always circling for weakness. She'd learned their rules, knew how they worked. And rule number 1? If you didn't fight back, they only pushed harder. Friday. Cafeteria. The air was thick with noise, shouts across tables, trays banging, the smell of greasy pizza and something overfried lingering like a dare. Jasmine sat alone at the corner table, earbuds in, staring at nothing. The whispers floated in anyway, muffled through music. She's so weird. Why's she always alone? Probably doesn't even have friends. She didn't look up, didn't blink, but her grip tightened on the plastic fork in her hand. Then she felt it, that shift in the air. She looked up. Trent stood a few feet away, hands tucked into his Letterman jacket, wearing that same smug grin. Behind him, Liam, Kyle, and Chase hovered, eyes gleaming with expectation, waiting for the show. "You always eat alone?" Trent asked, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Jasmine said nothing. Her earbuds were still in, but the music had long gone silent. "You should try making friends," he added with mock concern. He glanced at her untouched tray, then at his friends. "Or maybe no one wants to sit with you." Kyle snorted. "Can you blame them?" Liam chuckled. "Maybe she likes being a loner." Trent took a step closer, his voice turning low and cruel. "Or maybe she just doesn't belong here." Under the table, Jasmine's hands curled into fists. Still, she didn't move, didn't speak, and Trent, as always, hated being ignored. In one swift, performative motion, he reached out, grabbed her tray, and flipped it. Crash. The cafeteria went still. Food hit the floor with a wet slap. Mashed potatoes smeared across her shoes. Milk spread in a wide, slow puddle. Gasps. Stifled laughter. Trent's grin widened. "Oops." Jasmine stared at the mess. Her cheeks burned, but her eyes stayed dry. Everyone watched, breath held, waiting for the reaction. Would she cry? Yell? Run? Instead, she moved slowly, deliberately. She pushed her chair back. The scrape echoed. Calmly, she pulled a napkin from the dispenser, wiped her hands, and stood. Every eye in the room followed her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't running. She was just getting started. She wouldn't give him what he wanted. But Trent wasn't finished. As she turned to walk away, he stepped in front of her, blocking the path. "Hey," he said, voice slick with sarcasm. "Where are you going?" "We're just starting to bond." Jasmine took a slow, steady breath. "Move!" The word cut through the noise, freezing the cafeteria. Trent blinked, caught off guard. His smirk twitched back into place. "What was that?" he asked, mocking. "Did you say something, new girl?" She met his eyes, calm, clear. "I said, move." Liam let out a loud laugh. "Whoa, she talks," Kyle added. "Feisty." Trent leaned in, his face inches from hers now. "Or what?" he whispered. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Her fists clenched at her sides. Then, "What the hell is going on here?" Miss Rhee, the assistant principal, stormed over. Her heels clicked like gunshots across the tile. All eyes snapped to her. She scanned the scene, Jasmine standing tall, food splattered on the floor, Trent grinning just a little too late. Trent backed up, hands raised in fake innocence. "Nothing, Miss Rhee. Just an accident." She didn't blink. Her gaze locked on Jasmine. "Is that true?" Jasmine hesitated. The room was dead silent. Dozens of eyes watched, but not a single voice spoke for her. She knew how this went. Boys like Trent didn't get in trouble. Not here, not in towns like this. So she swallowed hard, jaw tight, and said nothing. Swallowing hard, she muttered, "Yeah, accident." Trent smirked. Miss Rhee sighed. "Clean this up." And just like that, it was over. Trent's friends laughed and walked off, smug and victorious. As he followed, Trent tossed a final jab over his shoulder. "See you Monday, Whitfield." Jasmine stood there, staring at the mess. Cold mashed potatoes on the floor. Milk still puddled around her feet. She thought of her dad, how he always told her to stand up for herself. But what was the point, she wondered, when no one backed you up? She grabbed her backpack, walked out of the cafeteria, and didn't look back. But this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. The house was too quiet when she got home. She dropped her bag by the door with a heavy thud, kicked off her shoes, still stained with dried mashed potatoes, and stared at them in disgust. She didn't even want to touch them. "Jasmine, that you?" Her father's voice came from the kitchen. Elliot Whitfield wasn't a man who missed much. As Summit Ridge's new police chief, he had a habit of reading people like open books. Years in the field had sharpened his instincts. He always knew when something was off. Jasmine paused, pulling herself together. "Yeah, it's me." She stepped into the kitchen. He stood by the counter, still in uniform, sipping a fresh cup of coffee. His sharp eyes found hers immediately, and she knew. He could tell. His short hair was graying at the sides, and his sharp brown eyes scanned her face before she could even sit down. "You okay?" he asked. She forced a shrug. "Yeah." Chief Whitfield took a slow sip of coffee, his gaze never leaving her. "How was school?" Jasmine slid into a chair, tracing a scratch in the wooden table with her fingernail. "Fine." He set his mug down. "Try again." She sighed. She should have known better. Hiding things from her dad never worked. But part of her didn't want to talk, because talking didn't fix anything. It never had. Elliot crossed his arms. "Jasmine." She kept her eyes down. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Some kid dumped my lunch on me today." The words lingered in the silence. Her father didn't react right away. He was too composed for that. But the shift was there. In the tightness of his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. "Who?" Jasmine hesitated. She didn't want to say it. Didn't want him storming into school, making it worse. She knew how these things worked. Call out someone like Trent Dawson, and it only fueled them. "It doesn't matter," she muttered. His voice stayed calm but turned steel-edged. "It does." She rubbed her hands together. "If I name him, he'll just find new ways to make things worse. That's how it works." Elliot leaned forward slightly. "Not when he messes with the wrong girl." That made her look up. There was no fire in his tone, just quiet certainty. Jasmine saw it then. Not just her dad, the cop, but her dad who still saw her as his little girl, the one he swore to protect. Trent Dawson. Something flickered in her father's expression. Recognition. Jasmine narrowed her eyes. "You know him?" Elliot was quiet for a beat, then exhaled slowly. "I know his family," she scoffed. "Of course you do." He tapped his fingers against the counter, thinking. "And the school? What did they do?" She hesitated. "Nothing." His gaze sharpened. "Nothing?" Jasmine gave a tight nod. "Miss Rhee showed up, asked if it was an accident. I said yes." Elliot frowned. "Why?" She looked up, frustration bubbling. "Because if I told the truth, it wouldn't have changed anything. You really think they'd punish Trent Dawson? His dad's probably on the school board or something." Her father leaned forward, arms crossed. "And what message does that send?" She blinked. "What?" "When someone does something wrong," he said, his voice low but firm, "and we let it slide, what message does that send? To them? To you?" Jasmine looked down, unable to answer. Elliot shook his head, sighing. "I get it. You don't want to cause a scene. You're tired. But letting people like him walk away with it? That's how it keeps happening. Again and again." Jasmine sat in silence, her jaw tight. He was right, and she hated that he was right. But maybe this time, she wouldn't let it go. She clenched her jaw and looked away. I don't want to make it worse." Elliot was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to fight this alone." Jasmine swallowed hard. She wanted to believe him. But deep down, she wasn't sure anything could really change. What she didn't know was that her father had already made up his mind. This wasn't going to be ignored. And on Monday, Trent Dawson would find out exactly who he'd been messing with. Monday morning. Something felt different the moment Jasmine stepped out of her dad's car. The air buzzed with an unfamiliar tension. As she walked through the doors, the usual atmosphere of mocking stares and low snickers was replaced with hushed whispers and sideways glances. Not smug, not cruel, curious, cautious, like something had shifted overnight. She barely made it to her locker before the murmurs reached her. "Dude, the police chief is here," someone whispered. Jasmine's stomach tightened. She turned slowly toward the main office and saw him. Chief Elliot Whitfield, her father. Tall, calm, in full uniform, his badge catching the overhead lights. His presence alone seemed to ripple through the halls, making teachers stand straighter, students freeze mid-sentence. For the first time in a long while, Jasmine wasn't invisible. She was the daughter of the man who had just walked in to make things right. "Oh my God!" Jasmine breathed. Before she could move, the office door swung open. "Chief Whitfield," Principal Warren began, stepping out with a forced smile. He was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a nervous edge, like he was already regretting this meeting. "I really don't see why this had to be taken so far." Behind him stood Miss Rhee and the Dawsons. Jasmine's breath caught. Darren and Lauren Dawson looked exactly how she imagined. Darren, tall and broad-shouldered in a tailored suit, had the cool confidence of a man used to getting his way. Lauren, wrapped in a cream cashmere sweater, held her designer purse like it could shield her from anything unpleasant. Then there was Trent. No smirk, no swagger, just confusion. Like for the first time, the rules didn't make sense to him. Elliot didn't even spare Trent a glance. His eyes were locked on Principal Warren. "I took it this far," Chief Whitfield said, calm but unshakable, "because my daughter was humiliated in your cafeteria, and your staff stood by and did nothing." Miss Rhee shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "With all due respect, Chief, no excuses," Elliot cut in, voice sharp. "You watched it happen. You gave her a choice, lie or be ignored. That's not respect. That's failure." Darren Dawson let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "Chief? Really? Are we doing this? It was a schoolyard spat. Kids push boundaries. It happens." Elliot turned toward him slowly. "This wasn't a boundary. It was harassment. And your son knew exactly what he was doing." Jasmine's heart pounded. She'd never seen anyone talk back to the Dawsons like that. Trent's face was flushed, eyes darting between his parents and the chief like he was still waiting for someone to save him. But this time, no one did. "They're kids. It was just a misunderstanding," Darren said with a dismissive shrug. Elliot turned to him, his gaze like steel. "A misunderstanding?" His voice remained calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it, like a storm on the horizon. "Your son targeted my daughter, bullied her, and humiliated her in front of the entire school." Lauren let out an exaggerated sigh, clearly unbothered. "Chief Whitfield, do you know how often we get calls over things like this? Boys will be boys. It's hardly worth all this fuss." Jasmine's fists clenched under the table, her nails digging into her palms. But Elliot remained unshaken, his voice steady and cutting. "That's the problem. People like you raise boys like him, and then wonder why they grow up thinking they can get away with anything. Trent shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time, he looked small, out of his depth, like he didn't understand the gravity of the situation. His usual arrogance was gone. Principal Warren forced a smile, clearly uncomfortable. "Let's not escalate this further. Maybe we can come to some sort of agreement." "No," Elliot said firmly, his tone final. "No deals, only consequences." A heavy silence settled in the room. Jasmine swallowed hard. This was the side of her father she rarely saw. The chief, the one who commanded respect, who didn't back down. It was powerful, and yet it terrified her. Lauren Dawson rolled her eyes and gave her son a look. "Trent, apologize." Trent's jaw tightened, his body tense. "Mom," he muttered, exhaling slowly, clearly unwilling. But with a resigned look, he turned to face Jasmine, his posture stiff. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something far more uncomfortable. Humiliation. "Sorry," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Louder." Trent's face flushed, his ears turning a deep red as he gritted his teeth. With obvious reluctance, he said, "I'm sorry." The words were hollow, but they hung in the air all the same. Jasmine knew it wasn't real. She could see the resentment in his eyes, but for once, he wasn't the one in control. Elliot turned back to Principal Warren, his voice cold and commanding. "This isn't over. I want a full report on this incident. And if this school has a history of turning a blind eye to bullying, I'll find out." Darren Dawson's smile vanished, his face hardening. "You don't want to make enemies with the wrong people, Chief." Elliot didn't flinch. He met Darren's gaze squarely. "Neither do you." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the office. The air in the room seemed to change the moment he left, the tension lingering like smoke after a fire. By lunchtime, the school was buzzing with whispers. Conversations stopped when Jasmine passed by, heads turning, eyes following her every step. Some kids avoided her. Others stared. Curiosity, maybe even respect, in their gazes. A few of the braver ones even gave her small nods, silently acknowledging what had just happened. Trent, however, was a different story. When he stormed into the cafeteria, his usual swagger was gone. His jaw was clenched tight, his fists balled at his sides, and the arrogance that always oozed from him had been replaced by something far uglier. Anger, shame, frustration. Jasmine could feel the shift. Guys like him, used to power, used to always getting their way, never took well to being brought down. And Trent Dawson? He was no exception. They hated feeling powerless. So when Jasmine walked past him to grab a tray, Trent muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Guess Daddy had to fight your battles for you, huh?" Jasmine froze. The chatter of the cafeteria seemed to disappear. She slowly turned, locking eyes with him. "What did you just say?" Trent stepped closer, his lips curled into a sneer. "You heard me. You think this makes you special? That people actually care about you? The second your dad's gone, you're nothing again." Jasmine's pulse raced, but she didn't flinch. This time, she didn't walk away. She squared her shoulders and lifted her chin, standing taller than ever before. "You're mad," she said quietly. Trent blinked, caught off guard. "What?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "You thought you'd get away with it, like always. But for once, someone actually stopped you." His sneer faltered, just for a second. Jasmine took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "That's why you're mad. Because now everyone knows the truth. You're not untouchable." She leaned in a little, lowering her voice. "And now, they don't respect you. They pity you." Trent's face turned a deep shade of red. His eyes burned with fury. "Shut up!" Jasmine smiled, her voice soft but strong. "Make me." For the first time, Trent backed down. His fists trembled, but he didn't speak another word. Instead, he stormed off, shoving past his friends without looking back. Jasmine exhaled, feeling the adrenaline still rushing through her. She could sense the eyes on her, the weight of everyone's stares, but for the first time since moving here, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like an outsider. She felt seen. The shift. By the end of the day, everything had changed. The kids who once laughed at Trent's jokes now ignored him. The whispers that used to follow Jasmine were now about him. Trent kept his head down, avoiding eye contact, his usual swagger gone. Jasmine didn't need an apology. She didn't need him to admit he was wrong. The truth was simple. He'd already lost. The moment her father stepped into that office, the moment the school was forced to confront the truth, Trent's power was gone. Without it, he was just another kid. The ride home. Jasmine climbed into her dad's car, the door clicking shut behind her. Elliot glanced at her, his gaze soft but knowing. "How was school?" he asked. She hesitated, then allowed herself a smile, the first one in weeks. "Not bad." Elliot smirked, pulling out of the parking lot. "See? People like Trent only have power if you give it to them." Jasmine looked out the window, the weight of his words sinking in. "Yeah, I get that now." A comfortable silence settled between them, the hum of the car filling the space. Then Elliot spoke again, his voice steady, but with a hint of something deeper. "You know," he began, "I didn't stand up for you because I thought you were weak." Jasmine frowned, confused. "What?" He kept his eyes on the road, his expression unreadable. "I did it because I knew you weren't. I just needed you to see it for yourself." Jasmine's throat tightened. For so long she had felt small, like the only way to survive was to stay quiet, to disappear. But today, something inside her had shifted. She had learned something important. Standing up for yourself wasn't about fighting back. It was about knowing your worth. And once you truly understood that, no one could take it from you.